Hello and welcome. My name is Charlie Hamer. I'm one of the co-founders of Public Sector Network. And for those of you that don't know us, Public Sector Network is a global community that's been around for almost 10 years, operating across Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, and the UK. Our mission is to better connect government and industry and academia to facilitate the sharing of ideas, best practices, enable networking and benchmarking. Ultimately, our goal is to drive improvements in government services and achieve better outcomes for communities. We achieve this through a variety of different ways, events being one of our key offerings, ranging from intimate gatherings of 10 people up to large scale of thousands of participants. They're often run in partnership with government agencies and departments from across the globe and the nations I just mentioned. In addition, we have our academy, which delivers both public courses and custom, as well as then in-house training offerings, as well as our research and advisory division, which conducts regular research, hosts regular research council meetings, and produces custom research into different topics and themes. All of these elements are then knitted together via our online community platform with different groups, communities of practice for a continuous learning environment. So on to today, we're going to be here today to talk about leadership, a very super important topic, one close to my heart as well. So as we know, leadership is one of the most critical aspects of any organization, and it is particularly vital within the public sector, where decisions and actions can have far-reaching impacts on communities. Effective leadership involves more than just managing tasks and overseeing projects. It's about inspiring and guiding teams, fostering collaboration, and making informed decisions that align with the broader goals of the organization. Great leaders are those that can build trust, cultivate strong relationships, and create environments where the teams feel motivated and empowered to achieve their best work. However, as we all know, those in those positions, the journey to becoming a successful leader is filled with challenges, especially for those transitioning from specialist roles to leadership roles. This shift requires not only a set of new skills, but also a new mindset, one that prioritizes the development of well-being of others, as well as the overall success of the team. So today we have the pleasure of speaking with Malcolm Dawes, the Managing Director of DTA Worldwide, who will share his insights on the key principles and practices that can help new and aspiring leaders navigate these challenges and thrive in their leadership roles. So Malcolm, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Good to be here.
Thank you. So Malcolm, let's get into it. Let's start by discussing the relevance of leadership training, especially for new managers. Based off your extensive experience in this space, why is it so important for professionals, particularly in the public sector, to receive this kind of training as they transition into leadership roles?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one of the things that immediately comes to mind is the fact that many managers become managers because they're excellent in their functional role or specialist role. And those roles, whilst giving us the ability to excel and be excellent at what we do, they don't necessarily contain or have the same skill set as managers and leaders require. And I think one of the biggest challenges for people moving into management is, first of all, to understand that management and leadership is different. I think a lot of people pick up management skills from their own managers or from watching other managers. But those skills are really quite different from leadership itself. And when we talk about leadership, I often, when running workshops, make sure that people understand the difference between the two, because I think one of the biggest challenges is A, to become a manager. And then B, once you become that manager, recognize that you have to have a totally separate set of skills, which is leadership. I think that's probably best summed up with a phrase or a quote, and I can't remember who gave it now, but the saying is that managers do things right. In other words, they follow process, procedures, standard operating procedures. They give direction, set the rules and follow the rules and so on. And probably no more so than in the public sector, which is often has its own set of rules and regulations and restrictions. And organizations and the public sector in particular need to have managers who do things right and follow those processes. Otherwise, the consequences can be dire. But leaders, on the other hand, have to do something a little bit different, if you like, and they do the right thing. In other words, they follow the processes and procedures and rules and regulations. They set objectives, they set budgets. But when they communicate, when they are dealing with people in their teams or stakeholders or across a department, they need to do so by communicating the things that are done right, but in the way that appeals to the other person. I guess that's a fairly simple way to sum it up.
Yep, great. Completely agree. So can you share any recent challenges or trends that new managers are facing across the work that you've done, particularly in government, if you have any references to it, and how these challenges can be addressed through effective leadership practices?
Yeah, I think one topic that very often comes up is that of resourcing, and of
Mm,
course, everywhere I go, people say, "Well, if we had two or three more people, then things would be easy." The problem is, of course, we can't just conjure up two or three more people, or even
mm,
one more person, because of budget restrictions and so on. And so, I think, given that there are things which leadership and management have less control over, such as getting more people, it's how we deal with the people we've got. And I think one of those key things is managing people's performance, recruiting the right people in the first place. And I have a belief, I guess, which is, rather than performance management of people who aren't doing well, let's manage people and their performance when they first join the team, or if you inherit a team as a new leader. So performance management becomes something which is seen as a positive thing. So whilst resourcing can be a challenge, and it is a trend that I see a lot, so is performance management. And it's often seen that we leave people alone until such time as they don't perform. Then we
mm,
performance manage them. I think some of the easiest things for leaders to do are to motivate, or to create an environment in which
mm,
people feel motivated. And therefore, whilst there are resourcing challenges, and as I say, that is a trend I see, there is also a desire to want to learn how to motivate. And I don't believe one person can motivate another, but I do believe that leaders, if they understand the techniques of motivation, they understand people, they understand what makes people tick, if you like,
mm,
then they
mhm,
can create that environment of motivation, which somewhat overcomes the challenge of resourcing, and enables the performance of people to be measured, and to help those people excel in their roles.
mm. A very timely piece of advice. The next follow-up that we've got for you is you've obviously worked with many managers, new managers. What are some of the top tips or best practices for transitioning from those specialist roles to a leadership position? How can those new managers build trust, credibility, accountability within their teams effectively?
Yeah, you mentioned trust there, and I think in your introduction as well, you also mentioned
Mm,
trust. And I think I'll come on to trusting perhaps in a moment. But one of the top tips I would give is that, number one is understand there is a difference between management and leadership, and therefore
mm,
know that when you're coming into these roles, you need to develop both sets of skills. Um, I think the other thing is to know yourself first. As we mentioned earlier on, people who get into management roles often do so because they're excellent in their functional or specialist role. So knowing yourself, knowing how you come across to people, and perhaps doing some work around understanding behaviors, I think that's a really important thing to do. If you understand yourself, first of all, and how you come across to other people as a leader, then it makes it a little easier to manage people and lead people. And of course, the key to that is knowing your people.
mhm,
I think one of the things that builds trust, and one of the things that doesn't happen often enough, is for leaders to say to the members of their team on individual one-to-one basis, how can we work together? What is it you need from me to help you excel in your role? Because as a leader, we have a responsibility not only for delivering outcomes, but also, I guess, a duty of care to help people through their careers, through their own development. So there's a sort of multifaceted aspect to it. And on that point of trust, I think if you can know yourself, know other people, build that trust through being honest and being open, that certainly, that demonstration, and I think you can demonstrate trust by showing respect for people, by being reliable, by setting up one-to-one meetings and having those meetings regularly. Because oftentimes I hear managers say, well, we can't have a meeting every week or every fortnight because I'm just too busy.
mhm.
But if your role is to be a leader of people, then how else do you do that unless you meet and understand and know your people? That
Mm,
thing about trust as well is about open communication, of course, and also, I think, showing your vulnerability.
mhm,
Uh, Leaders and managers often believe they have to have all the answers, and none of us have all the answers, not even you and me, Charlie. So we need to show our vulnerability about what we don't know, especially if you're newer into the leadership space. But you can almost guarantee that there'll be somebody in your team or in another team, if you are a new leader, that can help you to answer the questions which perhaps you don't have. So I think try not to be a perfectionist.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, you kind of answered the next question there, but I think having that high level of emotional intelligence, being self-aware, knowing yourself, absolutely, it's super critical. You've kind of answered the next question. I think is what are some of the common pitfalls that new managers should avoid, and how can I guess they avoid those?
Yeah, I think I maybe partly answered that, but I also think one of the pitfalls is managers often trying to be a friend of people in their team. It's a very different relationship. By all means, be friendly. But being a friend when you're a manager and a leader sometimes makes you come unstuck. So I think one of the big pitfalls is that managers try and become the friend of people in their team. And I've seen many occasions where there may be a barbecue or a Christmas party or whatever, and that mark is overstepped. So be friendly by all means. But coming back to the pitfall is if we don't understand other people, that's really quite a challenging thing to do. So I think a pitfall is don't fall into the trap of not motivating people, of not understanding behavioral style. And like I said earlier on, know yourself and then know your people. That way you can do the whole range of skills from motivation and performance management, meeting people regularly. And if you set yourself up for success at the beginning and set clear expectations of the people in your team, then it makes life an awful lot easier. And you mentioned there as well about emotional intelligence. I think emotional intelligence and behavioral flexibility and the knowledge of different communication styles are probably the two foundation pieces of leadership, which in my experience, I've seen where people learn these things and practice them because they don't come overnight. They certainly have a much easier life as a leader, and they have a high performing team.
I think one of the books behind me on the shelf is Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence. So it's a very, very well-known book and a very good book to read for a new leader or a new manager or anyone in general.
Indeed.
So finally, as you know yourself, and I know you do deliver several different types of training courses and leadership courses with us for the public sector. Can you give us a little, I guess, a few hints or a few key takeaways that you see as standing out on some of the courses that you deliver for ourselves?
Sure. I think people often come to workshops and courses thinking it's going to be all skills. And whilst we absolutely teach skills and facilitate understanding and facilitate skills development, such as those things I've spoken about with motivation and communication and so on, I think there's a step before that, which we invariably carry out on the leadership development courses, which we run with Public Sector Network. And that is to understand, and I said before about understanding yourself, is a lovely little model, which you may have come across, which is understanding, first of all, about the things that you believe about the workplace, about your colleagues, about your stakeholders, have a direct effect on the way you behave. So one of the things that underpins the leadership workshops that we run is to get people to really understand anything that they believe about their workplace, their colleagues, will lead directly to their behavior. And to give you a quick example of that, if, in other words, somebody feels that somebody isn't pulling their weight within their team, their behavior might be to take them to one side and raise their voice, or to have some form of discipline, let's call it. So that if we believe that somebody maybe isn't pulling their weight and think, well, why might that be? In other words, we interrupt our sort of knee-jerk reaction to say, well, you're not pulling your weight, let's do something about it. So that whole thing about the belief and the feelings that we get about that and the behaviors underpins everything we do. And then from that cascades a whole range of things, such as how do we create an environment of motivation? How do we communicate with people who are different than we are? How do we develop tolerance of people's different pace of work. So again, that underpinning point of knowing yourself and knowing how that affects other people, understanding how other people might behave, really does create a platform for strong leadership, which is what we developed through the sessions that we run with PSN.
Great. Well, thank you. You've also answered my follow-up question, so no need for that as well. Well, thank you, Malcolm. Those insights are absolutely fantastic. It's always a pleasure talking to you around leadership. And if you're interested in any of the courses that Malcolm and I have just been speaking about, see the link below to find those. And it's clear that strong, effective leadership is a crucial for success in any organization, particularly in the public sector, where the impact of good leadership can be felt more by the entire communities. So thank you again, Malcolm. Thank you, everyone, and hope to see you the next time.
Thank you, Charlie.